Olivia had always been a determined young woman, but life seemed to constantly test her ability to endure. Working tirelessly to pay the bills and support her dreams, she never imagined that a simple invitation to a luxurious gala would change her story. And it was in this environment of luxury and ostentation that her path crossed with Theo's, a successful businessman known for his charm and negotiation skills. However, the meeting wasn't just a matter of luck or destiny. Sometimes, opportunities appeared disguised as unexpected moments, like a simple collision between strangers. Olivia was far from feeling comfortable among expensive dresses and champagne, but something in her authenticity caught Theo's attention. He, used to being surrounded by selfish and deceitful people, saw in her a genuine person, distant from the glamour that surrounded him. And in the midst of superficial conversations, she seemed like a mystery to him, someone who, despite being simple, had her own unique glow. In that moment, he realized that perhaps life wasn't only about business deals and week-long contacts. With his sharp eye, Theo knew that the most valuable contracts aren't always the ones involving huge sums of money. On the contrary, true wealth lies in human connections. He, who had always played by reason, now found himself attracted to something deeper, something that came from the heart. On the other hand, Olivia, though uncomfortable, was intrigued. It was as if fate had cast her into a modern fairy tale, but with one difference: she knew that reality didn't offer guarantees. Their eyes met again, and for a moment, the sound of music and conversation became distant. What was happening? A simple coincidence, or something deeper? Olivia felt a chill down her spine, but she couldn't deny the attraction that was starting to grow in her chest. What seemed to be just a gala night was becoming a crossroads in her life, where decisions could shape the future in an irreversible way. It was there, among the sparkle of lights and the sophistication of the party, that something in Olivia began to change. She wasn't just a woman struggling against life's difficulties, but someone about to discover that the greatest challenges aren't always the ones we face alone. And Theo, in turn, began to realize that perhaps he was on the verge of a twist he could never have imagined. But what exactly was this unlikely encounter? Was there more at stake than simple attraction? Olivia didn't know, but she was about to find out, and this secret could change her forever. And who would have thought, perhaps fate was about to present something far more extraordinary than she ever dreamed. But was she ready for it? After the unexpected encounter, Olivia barely had time to process everything that was happening. Theo, with his confident demeanor and determined not to waste time, sought her out the next day. He knew his proposal wouldn't be conventional, but the situation called for a quick solution, and he wasn't willing to miss his chance. Without any preamble, he invited her to lunch. However, what she didn't expect was that the conversation would take such an unexpected turn. "I need a wife, and you need an opportunity," Theo said directly, without hesitation. The proposal was clear and straightforward. A marriage by contract, for just 1 week, to fulfill the terms of his grandfather's will. Olivia, stunned, could barely process those words. Marriage, by contract, all in the name of a will. How could something so surreal be real? She was facing a millionaire who, it seemed, preferred agreements over promises. "I know it sounds strange," Theo continued, observing Olivia's reaction, "but it's a unique opportunity. All you need to do is sign the contract and fulfill your part." For him, reason spoke louder. It was just a business transaction, a formality that would allow him to inherit his grandfather's estate and continue his life without further complications. But, looking at Olivia, something inside him began to question this logic. She wasn't just any woman, she seemed to embody honesty and truth. But, who would have thought, for Olivia, this seemed like an open door, an opportunity she had never imagined. In her mind, she knew she couldn't refuse. It was a rare chance to change her financial life and escape her limited routine. But what she didn't know was that this simple agreement, devoid of emotion, would bring her much more than money or comfort. This 1-week marriage was just the tip of the iceberg of a story that was about to unfold in surprising ways. The proposal seemed absurd, but for Olivia, it might be the path to a transformation. She needed a chance to change her life, and Theo seemed to be the only one offering a solution. But, at the same time, a chill ran down her spine. What was she really accepting? Was this just a game of interests, or something deeper? Theo seemed to act with reason, but what about her? What was the reason that moved her heart? And deep down, they both knew that the true answer to that question would only come with time. The proposal, which seemed so simple at first, was beginning to show that it could be much more complex than they had imagined. But for Olivia, there was something in her intuition that told her that, somehow, this agreement would lead her to a destination she still didn't understand. She just didn't know yet if she was ready for that journey. After accepting the proposal, Olivia found herself immersed in a world completely different from her own. Theo's mansion was grand, with marble walls, crystal chandeliers, and lush gardens that looked like they had come straight out of a movie. She, a young woman accustomed to simplicity, felt out of place, like an actress on a stage without a script. But at the same time, there was something fascinating about this new world. It wasn't just the visible wealth, but the challenge of adapting to this reality that made her grow. Theo, for his part, watched Olivia's reactions closely. He wasn't used to this type of woman, someone simple, direct, and uninterested in appearances. He, who had always had to deal with people who approached him for status or financial reasons, saw in Olivia a rare authenticity. And even more surprising, he began to realize that his own life, filled with luxury and demands, no longer brought him the happiness he had imagined. There was something missing in his world, and Olivia, with her naturalness, was bringing that emptiness to the surface. Olivia's adaptation was not easy. Every corner of the mansion seemed like a reflection of a life she didn't recognize. But at the same time, something in her was beginning to take shape. Each day, she began to understand more about Theo's universe, his responsibilities, and the dilemmas of a man who seemed to have everything, yet at the same time felt like he was losing his true essence. What seemed to be a simple marriage of convenience started to reveal layers she never imagined. She knew that her presence there wasn't the result of romantic love, but rather a contract. However, little by little, living with Theo made her question her own limits. Did the life of luxury, which once seemed like a distant dream, truly bring the happiness she had imagined? And Theo, with all his reason and coldness, also began to question whether his life was more than just business and appearances. Were they both trapped in different worlds, or would their forced coexistence begin to create something more? Between luxurious dinners and formal conversations, Olivia and Theo began to discover more about each other than they could have imagined. But while she felt distant from that life of wealth, he began to realize that he no longer knew who he truly was. Was it possible for a millionaire, used to controlling everything around him, to be touched by something that couldn't be measured with money? And Olivia, with her simple and pure heart, was starting to realize that true transformation might come from within. They were both living in worlds that seemed distant, but at the same time, they were closer than they had imagined. Their daily coexistence forced them to look beyond appearances and agreements, and they both began to realize that, despite their different worlds, they could find common ground. But what would truly unite their worlds? What would it take for them to allow themselves to go beyond contracts and social conventions? As the days passed, Olivia and Theo found themselves increasingly involved in a series of social events that demanded perfection. Gala after gala, formal dinners, and business meetings, the pressure to maintain appearances was immense. However, although both knew the marriage was a farce, the coexistence in these social events forced them to act as if they were truly in love. Olivia, who had once felt out of place, began to realize that her authenticity could be an advantage amid the superficiality of Theo's world. Theo, with his natural ability to manipulate situations and make good deals, initially believed he could keep everything under control. But as the public appearances increased, he began to notice that there was something in Olivia that couldn't simply be controlled or manipulated. The way she genuinely smiled at people, how she cared about the details, and how she seemed to live in the moment made him question his own motivations. How could he maintain the farce of a marriage that, deep down, seemed to be becoming real for him? But there was something more at stake. Olivia wasn't just a wife for show. She was beginning to understand the subtleties of Theo's world, even with a critical and uncomplicated view. She knew that, deep down, she couldn't give in to the pressure of maintaining appearances, but she also understood that to navigate this world, she had to play the game according to the rules. The combination of her humility and Theo's posture created a fascinating contrast that began to win the admiration of others. Little by little, Olivia and Theo began to support each other. He taught her how to behave at business meetings and sophisticated events, while she showed him that the true value of human interactions wasn't in the facade but in the sincerity of gestures. It was a delicate balance, where each had something to learn from the other. Both knew that, despite playing a role, something stronger and more genuine was forming between them. The marriage contract was still in place, but emotions could no longer be ignored. During one particularly tense evening, when the environment around them seemed to demand an unattainable perfection, Olivia looked at Theo and smiled. It was a simple smile, but full of understanding. It was as if she were silently saying, "I know we're not perfect, but together, we're creating something real." And in that moment, Theo felt that perhaps the farce had transformed into something more genuine than he had ever imagined. He no longer needed to pretend, no longer needed a contract to feel secure. In the end, the quest to maintain appearances forced them both to expose themselves more than they had imagined. What began as a facade, a convenient lie, began to slowly dissolve, making room for something deeper. But they were still just beginning to understand the true implications of being so close to one another. Keeping up appearances was a hard task, but perhaps, who knows, that effort was only the beginning of a real transformation. The forced coexistence between Olivia and Theo was beginning to yield unexpected results. That intimacy, which initially seemed to be just part of a contract, was transforming into something more genuine. At a more relaxed social event, Theo suggested they take a dance class to further strengthen their image as the perfect couple. Olivia, who had never danced in her life, was nervous but accepted the challenge. What she didn't know was that class would become the perfect setting for her feelings to begin to blossom. At first, Olivia felt clumsy, almost embarrassed for not having the elegance of the women around her. But, to her surprise, Theo guided her patiently. He encouraged her, giving her tips on how to improve her movements, and, without realizing it, began to see qualities in her that he had never imagined. She wasn't just a simple young woman. She had an energy that he rarely found in the people around him. He, always so focused on control and reason, now found himself lost in something more fluid and spontaneous. Dance, for him, became the perfect metaphor for their relationship. For Olivia, the dance class was more than just learning how to move gracefully. She began to realize that the connection forming with Theo was something that went beyond words and gestures. With each step, she felt a new level of trust between them, a level she never imagined possible in a marriage of convenience. Theo was more than just a successful businessman. He was revealing a side of himself she had never seen before, the side that sought more than just business and transactions. And so, amid the laughter and missteps in their dance, they both began to realize something was happening. They were more connected than they had imagined, more than a simple contract could allow. Olivia began to feel that behind the image of the cold, calculating businessman, there was a Theo capable of affection and, perhaps, even love. And Theo, in turn, saw in Olivia someone with a different worldview from his own, but equally important. She taught him to look beyond material wealth, to see the value in the small things. But, as in any dance, there were moments of tension. What seemed like a smooth and natural move would quickly turn into a stumble. They were, in fact, on a path they didn't know where it would lead. No matter how much the connection was growing, uncertainty still lingered in the air. Theo still wasn't sure if he could fully trust his feelings, and Olivia had doubts about how far this agreement was truly transforming into something more. Dance, while the perfect metaphor, also reflected the instability of their emotions. Still, both knew that despite the missteps, they were starting to understand each other better. The connection was growing deeper, and what started as a simple dance class was turning into a life lesson. Theo and Olivia were ready to face new challenges, but at the same time, they were discovering something more important, that the best connections come when you are true to yourself, when you dance without fear of mistakes or the unknown. As the coexistence between Olivia and Theo deepened, both began to face internal dilemmas. Theo, always driven by reason, saw the marriage as a practical solution to meet the demands of his grandfather's will. But as the days went by, he could no longer ignore the feelings that were starting to arise. Olivia, with her authenticity and simplicity, was breaking down the defenses he had built over the years. As a man who had always been guided by logic and control, he was being forced to confront something that could not be rationalized, his heart. On the other hand, Olivia was also facing her own dilemma. She knew she was falling in love with Theo, but at the same time, she felt that the contract was still the boundary that separated them from a true relationship. It was hard for her to understand how she could trust someone who had hired her for just 1 week. What did this love that was beginning to blossom between them truly mean? Was it real, or just a consequence of the circumstances? Olivia, with her cautious nature, wondered if she was being swept away by fleeting emotions, or if Theo truly saw her as something more than just a solution to a family problem. And Theo, seeing the confusion in Olivia's eyes, began to wonder if he was playing a game he didn't understand. He respected her, that was undeniable, but what did he really feel for her? Was it love, or just a reflection of his own loneliness? The doubts piled up as he tried to rationalize what was happening. But something inside him told him that this time, reason was not enough. The answers he was looking for weren't in numbers or transactions, but in the feelings he was starting to develop for Olivia. Yet, both knew they were at a crossroads. Reason and heart were in a silent battle, and each of them was trying to find balance. Theo wondered if he could let go of control of his world of business and formal agreements to make room for something riskier, something more human. Olivia, in turn, questioned whether she should give in to what she was feeling or continue protecting her heart, always with one foot back. Their insecurity brought them together, but also pushed them apart. Although both were searching for an answer, something told them that there was no simple path. True love was not a matter of logic, and contracts couldn't define what the heart desired. Theo and Olivia's internal struggle mirrored the journey of self-discovery each of them needed to take. But deep down, they knew they couldn't move forward without deciding which path to take, reason or heart. And so, as doubts lingered in the air, their coexistence became more intense. They were about to make a decision that would change their lives forever. But what they didn't know yet was that the true challenge was just beginning. What would it really mean to follow the heart, and how far could reason accompany them on this uncertain path? The marriage contract, which had started as a formality, no longer made sense to either of them. Theo and Olivia had gone through an emotional journey together, and what had seemed like a soulless agreement had now transformed into something much deeper. Both realized, perhaps too late, that what they were living wasn't just a marriage of convenience, but a relationship that challenged them to become better people. What began as a legal obligation had now become a genuine bond that could no longer be ignored. For Theo, the transformation was quiet but powerful. He, who had always been dominated by reason and the desire to control everything around him, finally realized that love could not be manipulated or controlled. He saw in Olivia a strength he had never imagined, something that transcended contracts and business. She was not just a temporary wife, but a woman with a heart full of life, capable of showing him that true happiness didn't come from material success, but from true human connection. Theo finally understood that, no matter how powerful he was in the business world, he needed to learn how to surrender to love. Olivia, in turn, also found herself transformed. In the beginning, she had accepted the marriage as an opportunity to improve her financial life, expecting nothing more than a contract without emotion. But as she grew closer to Theo, she realized he was more than the appearance of a cold, calculating millionaire. He was, in fact, someone who was learning to open himself to the world of the heart, and that touched her deeply. She began to understand that true love wasn't based just on promises or contracts, but on trust and mutual surrender. Together, Theo and Olivia decided that the contract was no longer necessary. They were ready to build a future together, not based on a formal agreement, but on respect, trust, and the genuine love they had discovered throughout their journey. What had started as a farce had transformed into something authentic and powerful. They were ready to abandon the formalities and live according to their own feelings. True love didn't need contracts, because it was something that couldn't be bought but was earned in the day-to-day. And so, in the end, Olivia and Theo realized that, as important as reason had been in the beginning, it was true love that had truly transformed their lives. It was no longer about Theo's wealth or Olivia's struggles. It was about what they had become together, how they had overcome challenges, and transformed into better people. What had started as a simple marriage agreement had become the foundation of a solid and true love that they both knew they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. But what did Theo and Olivia's journey really teach? Perhaps the greatest lesson was that true love isn't a matter of luck or destiny, but of choice. And, by choosing love, they discovered that what had seemed like a simple agreement had transformed into the truest and most powerful story either of them had ever lived. Have you ever wondered how far a simple agreement can take us? What started as an emotionless marriage, based on interests and contracts, turned into a true and unexpected love story. And what does that mean for you? Sometimes life presents us with opportunities disguised as challenges, and it's up to us to decide what to do with them. Are you also living in a contract without realizing it? And what if true love and transformation were waiting for you, just around the corner in the next decision? Maybe it's time to rethink the choices you've been making. Perhaps, like Theo and Olivia, you need to open your heart to what life is truly offering you. What can you learn from this story and apply it to your own life? What really matters to you, the contracts of reason or the calls of the heart? If you feel ready to take the path of transformation, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We're just beginning to explore the real lessons life has to teach us. Are you ready to change your life?